Hey everyone, welcome to the Free Assange Vigil Week 48. This is Saturday, June 6th, and my name is Steve Poikinen. I am joined by my co-host, Andrew Smith. We are very happy to welcome our guests, Nikki and Victor Dedish, who we will get to very shortly. But first, let me run down some numbers for you. Today marks 3,469 days since the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange. 422 days since he was trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. 93 days remain until the second phase of Julian Assange's extradition hearing. Reality Winner has been incarcerated for 1,099 days, making her the longest serving Espionage Act prisoner. And on the positive side, Chelsea Manning is enjoying her 85th day of freedom since the 10-year-long WikiLeaks grand jury was dismissed. Guys, we are trying to get back to DC in September. There are 3 weeks of hearings scheduled for Julian Assange, beginning September 7th. We have a GoFundMe up for that, which we will be putting up on screen throughout the broadcast. It is we really need your help on this one. We do. And you guys dug deep and came through back in February. We need that same energy going into this. And I feel like it's there. We also have a call to action for this week, which we will put up throughout the show as well. But first, let's jump into our guests. Nikki, how you doing? It's good to see you again.
Hi.
And Victor, I think it's my first time meeting you, but you are a very personable and pleasant man, and I look forward to the conversation. So let's jump in and give the folks who are watching a little bit of background on both of you. I really honestly don't care who jumps in first on this one, but tell us about yourself and tell us why you're supporting Julian Assange and why you got involved on the activism side of things.
Victor, you go first.
Well, personally, I'm the webmaster of an alternative information website in France, which is called Le Grand Soir, which is one of the main alternative websites in French-speaking language. I became aware of the necessity to get involved in alternative media, into alternative information during the Nicaragua Revolution, where I saw for the first time the level of the disinformation, where I actually was a witness of disinformation operations. So it was the first time that I actually experienced firsthand the disinformation process and how it worked. So as a human being, I took it to myself to engage into the re-information struggle, if one may say. And when WikiLeaks arrived on the scene, I must admit that we were very interested in the phenomenon. It actually suited our mind frame, what we considered being true information, unfiltered information, a tool for the whistleblowers, as it was at the time. And we assisted live at that time at the operation Destroy WikiLeaks, if you may call it so, and expressing our solidarity as we could at that time. That was around 2010. We got into trouble just because we were showing banners or the picture of the logo of WikiLeaks on our site. We had our PayPal accounts closed. All the platforms that we used, technical platforms, were also closed. So we just suffered firsthand again part of the repression against WikiLeaks that extended to anyone who was expressing any kind of solidarity with WikiLeaks at that time. Then a strange thing happened. the propaganda machine went into action. And I must admit that I myself, with all my experience or whatever, became a victim of that propaganda. In the sense that we slowed down our solidarity with WikiLeaks. We had this strange feeling that Julian Assange made some mistakes, whatever they were. At the end, I was actually even thinking about those famous dirty socks that he was wearing as the what was it? The Guardian started mentioning. Then all of a sudden one day I said, what the hell, Victor, are you doing thinking about the socks of Julian Assange or the cat of Julian Assange? And then there was the wake-up call when his mother published an appeal. That was in November 2018, if I am correct. Then all of a sudden, it was a wake-up call. I realized that, God damn it, everything that we cherished, everything that we fought for, they managed to make us forget it, actually, and abandon the most important fighter of true and unfiltered information. So, I don't know, maybe it's the guilt for having abandoned him all these years. But then we started full-time, and I must say it's been full-time since November 2018 that I've been fighting for Julian Assange. Full-time means that I don't go to bed if I haven't done something for him, in any sense, be it a translation of an article, or write myself an article, or whatever. The solidarity in France has been increasing slowly, but surely. I think it's pretty good what we've managed to do. For those who don't know, we've organized busloads of militants to go out there in front of Belmarsh or Westminster and show ourselves. We've been reaching the people, and I say the people, not the media. There's no way to reach the media. We can talk about that, the why, and why we can't seem to have any effect on them. I have my own opinion. But then it's come to a point today where I've been re-examining everything we've been doing so far. Personally, I'm quite unsatisfied with the impact that we have had on this case. And I've been asking myself why. What have we done wrong if we could have done something better? Why is it that the message is so difficult to transmit to the common people? Was the campaign of disinformation so efficient that there's nothing that can be done? And so forth and so on. So far so good. Nikki, you can start and
Okay.
get back to that later.
A little bit about me. I'm a lawyer by profession, and author and screenwriter at the moment. I grew up in Australia, in the state of Victoria, like Julian, and I am admitted there as a barrister and solicitor, and in Northern Ireland as well as solicitor. I'm not practicing. I haven't been practicing for about a decade, but I do use my legal knowledge to advance any causes I'm involved in. I have done a lot of work in women's rights. I wrote a book, I'll advertise it, Juste un gifle, Just One Slap, which I am translating now into English. So my main background has been in women's human rights, and I got involved with Julian's case because I smelled a rat right from the beginning, actually. So when they started to assassinate him with the character assassination, the whole thing was quite bizarre, the way it was orchestrated. And I noticed that they were going after another 2 WikiLeaks guys for sexually related type of offences. One is Trevor Fitzgibbons and Jacob Applebaum. So, 3 rapists in one group is a bit, too much.
Statistically speaking, yeah, suspicious.
Yeah. And it's also, and of course, when Chelsea Manning at the time was Bradley Manning, they were trying to, set up the sexual thing around him because he was him then. Also, so it's one of the classical attacks. You start with the sexual, bizarre details, and then they go on after that. And so I started following it quite closely from the time that he went into the embassy, more closely from the time that he went. And then I kind of thought that it would be taking. I never thought it would go this far. I really thought that it would just go away, and then it didn't. And then so things got very dangerous already in 2018. So I started giving some interviews. In July 2018, I gave an interview, and then after that, I got fairly militant after that. And once he got arrested, things were quite clear as to how dangerous the situation was going to be, not just for him, but for all of us, really, at the end, anyone who's willing to speak up the truth and stand up to their power. Because we have our own power. We have people power, and I believe in that. But unfortunately, our people power is very dispersed and not sufficiently organized. So for me, it was a necessary step to take because I do believe in democracy, real democracy, not the show democracy that we have with all the show things, the show trials and the show everything else. So it's a lot of it has to do with my personal convictions about what society we should live in, what society I want to live in, so we have to be part of the world we want to live in. And so I also, like Victor, have spent hours for the last 2 years, sometimes 15 hours a day, writing complaints. I lodged a complaint against Emma Arbuthnot, who's the chief magistrate in the case, towards the end of, when was it? It was towards the end of 2019. And there was an article written about that complaint in Sputnik. And so then I lodged further complaints. I lodged a complaint. I wrote to Lord Buckland, who is, the top lawyer in the UK, if you like. The simplest way of describing him rather than, giving Lord Buckland or all of these titles. And I complained about crimes against humanity being committed against Julian Assange. I never received a response. And since then, every time I see any kind of institution that is supposedly there for press freedom that does not mention his name or anything about his situation, I make sure that I contact them. I recently contacted UNESCO. They had a webinar on press freedom, and not once was he mentioned. Even though I went on the chat and I was saying, can you mention this guy? Like press freedom, yeah. So what I do mainly is, apart from whatever legal avenue I can find, but as an activist, obviously, whatever legal not loopholes really, because they're the ones who are creating. They create the loopholes and I try to close them. So that's what I do mainly. But I use, as I say to other activists, I use my knowledge of the law politically, because this is not winnable within a law venue. It's not going to be winnable in the courts, because the courts are stacked against him. The government is so involved in what happened. Forget about the separation of powers. It's not happening. I've been saying to some of the activists that, in fact, the UK right now is actually having a secret constitutional crisis, and they're not aware of it, because it's very clear that the government is totally involved in what's happening in the courts, and this is mainly from the flagrant conflicts of interest that Emma Arbuthnot has through her husband and her son. There have been excellent articles published by the Daily Maverick, by Mark Curtis and Matt Kennard, with all the supporting evidence as to her amazing, like this is like this octopus, her tentacles are everywhere. I don't know whose tentacles, there's lots of tentacles everywhere. But definitely the husband, the son, Sajid David, who's the ex-Home Secretary who signed off on the extradition, is also, totally to his eyeballs in it. So, the people who are doing this witch hunt are, completely conflicted in the situation. And I was recently informed that at the last hearing, Vanessa Barreto, who is the so-called judge, if anyone knows, that's her formal title, she apparently, now I'm waiting to get all the corroborating evidence from other witnesses, that she said at some stage early on in the proceeding that she didn't want to delay the hearing because the government was in a hurry. Now, if that's not evidence that the government is definitely interfering in how this trial is going to go, I don't know what is. So, but I'm waiting to get more information about that last statement. It's not the only time. We have enough evidence now that the government, the executive, right? Because there's the three branches of government in the separation of powers. So the executive is definitely involved all the way in what's happening here with Julian, and all of them are conflicted in one way or another.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This is such a political shit show.
Yeah.
And the way that the UK has handled this as more or less just a puppet government of the United States. I've been referring to Vanessa Barreto as the concierge for the U.S. State Department, which
Correct.
I believe that's an accurate statement.
Correct.
And the thought that Lady Arbuthnot has not recused herself, was deeply mired into WikiLeaks documents as her direct family members are, is just taking the persecution of Julian Assange one step further. You could put literal kangaroos in the court and have a fairer trial than what Julian Assange has been subjected to up to this point. And that goes all the way back to the investigation, the open investigation by the Swedish police department. It is miscarriage of justice is a trite phrase in this instance. It is an absolute scam. There is no there's no attempt to being fair in this. There's no attempt to hide the lack of rule of law.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I think as far as Emma Arbuthnot is concerned, I think she should be charged with misconduct in public office, and I think all the judges should be investigated and prosecuted for torture. They can, judges are not above the law. In Nuremberg judged 16 judges, I think, were in front of the Nuremberg court, and I think I'm not wrong, 12 of them were convicted. I may be wrong about the number, but judges, the media, there were 2 people from the media that were prosecuted. None of these are above the law. They think they are. As for Vanessa, if this shit show really goes down the gurgler, she's the fall guy. She just doesn't know yet. She has no idea that it's not going to be Lady or Lord Arbuthnot that are going to take it on the chin. In the end, if they need somebody to take the fall, it'll be her. So either she's got her back covered, and we don't know about that. Maybe she's got her back covered. But the way she's running the whole show, again, it's she's not hiding either. I mean, she's apparently turning up with prepared orders, rulings. She had to begin before she's heard. At least that's what we have read in reports from people who are there observing and reporting. That's not normal. I used to practice law. I used to go into court. You don't get a judge having an already prepared ruling unless it's the date for handing down a judgment, right? So usually a judge has to listen to the arguments, look at the evidence, and then they come to a decision, but not before. So she's a very bizarre judge.
When I talk to people, when I talk to people and give my conferences, one of the things I say is that people should understand that Julian Assange is not in front of a court with judges rubbing their chins and wondering what the hell is this case. He's actually in the hands of the criminals that have been exposed by WikiLeaks. He's actually fell into the trap that was prepared in Sweden. Okay? So he's not in front of judges who are just pondering the laws and the texts and the case. He's in front of people who are looking him into the eyes and saying, "We got you, you son of a bitch." That's the situation. So I myself have several guidelines when I try to accomplish something. The first one is, only the truth is revolutionary. That's a quote from Lenin. Sorry for the anarchists, but that's a quote.
Lenin wasn't an anarchist.
Yeah, that's why I said sorry for the anarchists, because usually they... The second one is that when you control the vocabulary, you control the terms of the debate. And when the enemy puts his words into your mouth and you start using his words, you know you've lost the war on communication. And to some extent, I think that's what we did. For instance, my emphasis would be on the word that everyone's been using. I know, I'm sorry, I'm just giving my opinion. The word extradition. God damn it. If you knew the definition of extradition, what's happening to Julian Assange and what's actually going on is anything but an extradition. An extradition is, let's say, well, the lawyer will correct me if I'm wrong, but basically it's sending someone back to the country where he committed a crime and to be judged. The fact is that Julian Assange has never been under a US jurisdiction. Even if he had committed a crime, which he hasn't, hasn't been charged of anything. So how the hell did they make us use that fucking word extradition? Of course, the Americans use the word extradition like they use the word peacekeeping operation in Iraq. They can use the words they like. Nothing forces me to use the same one. I refuse. Absolutely, and I'm trying to convince our French militants here, and they're actually joining the bandwagon, if I may say so, to try and shift the vocabulary that we use. And we use the word of a rendition, or actually even myself do not hesitate in using the word kidnapping under the guise of legality.
The word we use,
right?
And it's something that we tried to inject throughout since the very beginning of this is
right. So I've banished from my vocabulary extradition because it's a rendition. If I'm addressing journalists, they know what that word means. But if I'm addressing a general public, rendition, the people, oh, what's that again? I remember I heard it somewhere, but what is it? So I just say an attempted kidnapping. I even go to say, this is as close as you can get to putting a hood on his head and throwing him into the trunk of a car.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when we talk about, we have used the word extradition, we will stop that. We will start using a rendition or extraordinary rendition. And when we speak about what happened to Julian at the Ecuadorian embassy, we refer to it as he was trafficked out of it. He was sold to the UK government and the US government for a $4.2 billion IMF loan that went to Ecuador that caused their country to go into a revolution almost immediately. We have a colleague, Jose. I'm not going to use his last name because he's in fear for his life. but he's in Ecuador and he keeps us updated on what is happening there. And there are people.
Jose, we all know Jose.
Yeah. But for, you know, I mean, and I'm sure Kevin, who's the name we gave to the NSA agent tasked to monitor the chat here. So if you hear us talk about a Kevin or say, "God damn it, Kevin," that's who we're referring to. I'm sure Kevin knows about Jose too, but we try to keep him. Pardon?
We call him George, but I think it's Kevin.
Okay, sure. No, I have a friend named Carlos that I call George too. It's, you know, but he's keeping us abreast of what's going on in Ecuador. And Lenin Moreno has fled. They haven't seen him in weeks. He passed all of his powers onto his secretary. His wife went to New York for a summit or something like that, and she hasn't returned. Like, Ecuador is in complete chaos right now, and this is directly result of this $4.2 billion IMF loan and the fact that Lenin Moreno sold out his country as well as sold out Julian Assange. It is a kind of a crystallizing moment, and we are beginning to see a semblance of that energy here in the U.S. over the assassination of George Floyd. Although that's just an instance or a catalyst, and this sort of collective rage has been bubbling and one manifestation or another for several years. And the predator class that rules not just the US, but most of the EU countries as well, has been deliberately hollowing out the center that makes countries thrive. It hollowed out a middle class, hollowed out a working class, and when the center of anything has been hollowed out, it can't hold. It breaks. It has to break because physics determine this. So now we've got people in the streets. We've got people in the streets everywhere. And what we're trying to do is sort of absorb that energy and transfer it into you guys, whatever your cause is, whatever your activism is centered around. It can't proliferate without a free flow of information. Kristen Hampson said this on Monday, coming out of Julian's case management hearing as well, which gives me hope because we've been screaming this for months and months and months and months and months. And maybe Kristen Hampson's watching the vigils every now and then because the same language is being used. But we can't. Your movement can't succeed without a free flow of information, without the access to primary source documentation. And that's what WikiLeaks is. It is a conduit for primary source information and very little else. You know, it's up to us to decide what documentation means and how we should feel about it. It's not up to a news outlet to tell us how to feel. And that's the message that we try to convey, you know, twice a week now.
Yeah, well,
so Victor, as one of the only people here not in a Five Eyes country, and that being the unholy intelligence alliance between the US, UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, how is organizing maybe a bit different over there where there's not the direct and constant threat of government surveillance and infiltration?
Well, since I don't know how it is in your country, I wouldn't know what to say. What would the differences be? Frankly speaking, from what I see, there's not really a major difference. In your case, you're talking about Walmart, and in my case, I'm talking about a supermarket. But basically, it's the same kind of. It's just a scale that changes. I don't think there's really any kind of difference. To get back to the case of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, the thing is that their form of journalism, at the beginning, someone realized, well, some of them realized immediately, but it took some time for the mainstream media to realize that the form of journalism applied by WikiLeaks was an existential threat to corrupt regimes. I think basically that's one of the things we should understand. It was just not a new form of journalism. It was actually an existential threat to corrupt regimes. And that's why the repression was so strong, and why it came so fast, and why the iron fist came so heavily over on Julian Assange. So apart from the fact of pointing out or underscoring the novelty of the object, the unknown object that was WikiLeaks, there was this really potential existential threat, and that's why they came after WikiLeaks so fast, so hard, with without any mercy, if I may say so. So it's the equivalent of nailing a nail on the doors of the barn. Assange, I don't know if they do in the countryside in America, but in France, there's ancient tradition where they used to nail an owl on the doors of the barn to scare all the other animals. So they're crucifying Julian Assange in public as a warning to anyone who would wish to reproduce or to do a new form of WikiLeaks, because after all, technically speaking, someone else could do the same thing and just pick it up where they dropped it. I haven't dropped it, but I mean, you could multiply WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks should have multiplied around the world. There should have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, half a dozen WikiLeaks, whatever. But no, they came after WikiLeaks, and they've decided that we do not have the right to know. Now, one of the things that bothers me is that as a member of the alternative media community, be it left or right or center or whatever, I find it very hard to understand why the support for WikiLeaks and Julian Assange is so weak. I think I would consider it weak. If you consider the number of alternative media in France, for instance, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of them. I think we're the only ones who have a banner mentioning WikiLeaks. I think we're the only ones who have a picture of Julian Assange, sending people to a page, summary of the case. I think we're the only ones who have officially financed the campaign, the solidarity campaign, and so forth and so on. So I'm in a position today, 2 years after, wondering how the hell could we not get the message through what should have been our natural allies, which is the alternative media. Some say, yeah, but they are. Of course they are. No, I'm talking about solidarity. I'm not talking about a journalistic interest in the case. I'm not talking about an article published here and there, now and then. I'm talking about pure, hardcore solidarity. God damn it. We want to save his life. We want to save WikiLeaks. There's no time for discussion. This is the time to mobilize and express our solidarity and total solidarity. Not, oh yeah, maybe he did something wrong. It's a bullshit. He never did anything wrong. Let's start from that. So we've decided more or less, when I say we, I mean me and the people closest to me in the struggle, to try and change the paradigm. Is that the correct word? To try and shift our campaign. Mm-hmm. Considering that we've been doing, all of us, more or less the same thing these last years, personally considering that I'm not quite satisfied with the result, well, I can't be. The only satisfactory result would be the freedom of Julian Assange, of course. But anyhow, I owe it to myself, I owe it to Julian, I owe it to everyone. It's time to sit down, think about it. Have we done what should have been done? For instance, using the word extradition. I think that was a big strategic mistake. We've been using it for years. That's another wake-up call. I think things could have been different, maybe, I don't know. It's not that I know, it's just that I think some things, and I hope they will have an effect. The second thing is that we will start addressing the alternative media kindly. First, starting, we will do it kindly. then maybe bullying them a bit. Anyhow, they need to wake up, because if they don't understand that when we say first they came for Julian, then they will come after you, the you does not mean the journalists of the mainstream media. Journalists of the mainstream media, they know where the red lines are, and they know that they will never cross them. And eventually, if the red lines move, as they seem to be moving actually in the United States, where apparently the simple fact of trying to report on a demonstration is it has become dangerous. Well, they're adapt to that. They're complaining now, but in a week's time, in a month's time, the mainstream media will adapt to the new rules. They will adapt to the new red lines, and they will shift as the red lines shift, and they will do what they will be told to do. So when they say after Julian, they will come after you, the you means the alternative media. God damn it. How come you don't understand that? How come these guys that I meet, that I congregate with, they don't seem to realize that they're the target of Operation Julian Assange, not the mainstream media? Who the hell will come after the anchorman on the news at 8 o'clock in France? Who the hell will come after the editor-in-chief of the New York Times? Nobody, for several reasons. The main one being that these people will never cross the red lines, will never put themselves in a position to bring cause to be arrested or whatever. They know when to stop, and they will do it for the sake of their salary, for the sake of their prestige, for the sake of ideological reasons, because they actually agree with the status quo. So what the hell would they become any mudrackers? Is that the right word?
Muckrakers, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you even see companies like the Washington. You even see companies like the Washington Post, controlled by Jeff Bezos, use information as basically blackmail, to where Amazon loses its big deal with the United States government for hosting data and servers for them.
When they start racking the mud, it's for their own agendas. Since when does a billionaire start sacrificing his money in the cause of democracy and pluralism or free press or whatever, blah, 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 blah? Come on, guys. It's a business. What am I? How do we get into this mind frame of believing that these guys are, do they employ people who are freedom fighters? I mean, if I were the millionaire owner of a newspaper, what are the rules for employing someone? Is it his attachment to free press and free expression, or is it something else? I mean, they're companies, basically. They work for the interest of their shareholders and for the propagandistic interest of their owners. So what the hell are we talking about? Of course, there is an apparent freedom of press and so on and so forth. But the truth that there isn't is, look what happened to WikiLeaks. So alternative media, that's our hope. I would hope one day that if we all bandwagon together, left and right, whatever, and all of a sudden we were pulling the wagon in the same direction, that is the solidarity with Julian Assange, things could change.
Jesus tap dancing Christ, Victor. If I'm allowed to fly out of the country ever again, I'm like, I'm bringing you a pouch of tobacco and a case of wine, and we're going to hang out for like a week and just talk. This is awesome. I couldn't agree with you more. When we were in DC in February, we held demonstrations in front of mainstream news outlets, but the people that we had a chance to speak to, we were talking to extensively about why, quote unquote, independent media or alternative media needs to get on board with this. We addressed this.
Hallelujah.
And there are so few outlets that stand up for Julian Assange. It is troubling. What is positive is that Jimmy Dore, who hands down has the biggest platform on independent media, will find ways to work Julian Assange's name into a conversation. And that's helpful. But the problem that we face is when an audience is only used to hearing about like the political horse race, when you give them new information or information that isn't about the political horse race, they tune it out because they've been programmed only to react to statements about the political horse race and things that confirm their biases about, Democrats or Republicans or quote unquote progressives or, democratic socialists that really only exist to reinforce capitalism and, have sassy clapbacks on Twitter. It is endlessly frustrating, but at the same time, I'm like a hopeful cynic. Okay, I mean idealistic cynic, which is a strange position to be in, But as an activist, I have to maintain a center of hope. As a realist, I know that I'm trying to achieve the impossible, but I keep fucking going because there's no choice
You don't have a choice.
whatsoever. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, thank you for that. I'll remember that you mentioned the wine and tobacco.
Yeah, write that
down. For instance, another axis of our future intervention, if I may say so, things that we're trying to change. I sometimes give conferences in schools of journalism, well, less and less now, or in trade unions, about the press, problems of the press. And one of my introductions is, who is against the freedom of the press in this room? I address the audience. And I count a few seconds because nobody raises their hand, of course. Then I raise my hand. People say, Victor, are you against the freedom of the press? I said, of course I am. Because you haven't defined what freedom you mean by what do you mean by freedom? And secondly, you haven't defined the press. You address the press, or you use the word press as if the press was an industry from top to bottom where everybody shares the same interests. I don't share the same interests as the New York Times. I'm not the same thing as the Washington Post. We don't do the same job. No, does WikiLeaks. So when you say the press, you're putting us all in the same category, even our enemies, because that's what they are, our enemies in a sense. And when you say freedom, you haven't defined freedom. Freedom, is it the freedom to lie? When Judith Miller was lying during the Iraqi war, did someone force her to do that? Or did she do it with all the freedom in the world? When The Guardian published a fake news article last year on Julian Assange, did someone force them to do it? Or did they do it freely? So actually, I don't hear many people complaining about the freedom of their freedom of the press, as long as they coincide with the interests of their owners. So what we're trying to do is, and that has a relationship with WikiLeaks. We don't talk about freedom of the press. We talk about our right to know, our right as a public to know, our right to information, which curtails the freedom of the press, because sometimes it's the freedom of the press which is the obstacle to our knowing. WikiLeaks was the way to circumvent, how's the word in English? To
get around.
Thank you. The freedom of the press not to inform us, because they can do it absolutely freely. I mean, not reporting can be an act of freedom. I mean, the journalists of The Guardian have decided to disinform us on the case of Julian Assange. Are they complaining about freedom? No, but I'm complaining about my right to know as a citizen. So my right to know is more important. Sir, I'm searching for the word. Sir, help me there. Help me. Too late.
Supersedes. Supersedes.
Supersedes. Thank you, Your Honor. No, you don't say Your Honor to a judge, the lawyer, do you? Supersedes the freedom of the press. Listen, guys, intellectually, you have to get this into our right to know supersedes the freedom of the press, because in that case, information does not become a right but a duty. The press is must inform us. It's not a liberty. It's not a freedom. It's a duty. Okay. So what WikiLeaks was doing was actually answering to our right to freedom and doing it very dutifully. And that's what cost them what has been happening to them. I don't know if I've been clear of that because I've been with that. Maybe it was a bit, but that's one of the things that one of the messages that I'm trying to convey to all our colleagues in the movements. So, because I think the freedom of the press is a trapped concept. The proof is that they use the same expression. And as I said, when you use the same terms as your enemies, then you're on the wrong path. You're not using the right vocabulary. They use the word freedom of the press. Then I instinctively think, okay, what am I supposed to use? What am I supposed to think? Because I can't, I feel somewhere inside me that that's not the right concept, the freedom of the press. So that's one of the things that we're trying to avoid.
Well,
you're a word bastard, Victor. I love it.
I am.
I do. I love it. We have a couple of questions in the chat. And either of you can answer this. How to be effectively radical in a breakdown of social order? That's the first question. The follow-up is, how can disabled people help most without sacrificing support networks?
how can disabled people, sorry, I didn't hear the question.
How can disabled people help the most without sacrificing their support networks?
Okay, when they say disabled people, what do they mean? Their physical disability, or talking about disability, or somebody who's not empowered? It's a strange question.
I would imagine it relates to physical disabilities as opposed to political ones.
Okay, and how can they help them? Well, I mean, there are simple actions like signing petitions, sending emails. For example, the campaign in Australia, there's two very strong campaigns. One is in Australia, Defend Assange, and the other one, there's two strong ones in the UK. One is Wise Up Action, and the other one is Don't Extradite. Sorry, they're using the word Don't Extradite Assange. And yeah, they're the ones that that are prominent in my mind at this point. They use the Australian campaign, for example, has a 3-click system where you can, it automatically sends lots of emails to the right people, to the, people who are in control of the torture, pleading with them to stop it. They won't stop. But the fact that we take this action and that it's on record is good, because at some stage, these people, like the Nazis did, the Nazis thought they would be ruling for 1,000 years. And so it kind of came down on them, a surprise, really, that they didn't think that they would be facing any court. And they didn't, and they thought that they would have a defense when they faced the court. The media of the time didn't expect to be prosecuted. They were. Two of them were prosecuted. The judges didn't expect. So things could change, and I think we're in a context that's very interesting historically, because yes, the whole world's on fire. We've got riots everywhere. One of the problems that we have from our side is that we're not yet well organized. We need to be more organized, and we need to. Yes, okay, we defend ourselves against, terrorist cops, etc. But we need to be attacking the people who give the orders. We need to be attacking Wall Street. We need to, the Jeff Bezoses, the Bill Gateses, the people who are the puppet masters and their strong lieutenants. So I think that we need to be more politically aware of the situation, the context. And we need to be more organized by our vanguard parties. Most countries have even a small vanguard type of party. So we need good leaders, not to take us there, but to guide a movement. And I think we see that in France with the yellow vests. And, I mean, it's a very interesting movement. It's not a pure movement because everyone thinks that, all revolutions are pure. They're not. Revolutions are not pure. They have all sorts of people in there, but they're a start. So we are, I think, in France in a pre-revolutionary type of phase that has been going on for a bit too long because they were late to organize with the trade unions. I mean, in some ways you can have the protests and general strikes, unlimited general strike. That'll bring them to their knees. They're already on their knees because of coronavirus, and it's only 2 months. So imagine if right now, when the beast is weak and wounded, if right now the workers decided, well, right now we're going to go on a general strike. Now, we're not going to go back to your jobs because you think it's safe whilst you're wearing masks and hiding. You know what I mean? So I think that people have to look around them and not concentrate on what's presented to them. For example, in the States, you've got 2 candidates. This is circus between the 2 candidates. There are other candidates in the US, and I think they're good from my perspective as somebody who comes from the left. I think that they're, I mean, if you don't want to go left in the States, you've got the Green Party, which is not left. It's better, it's better than the other 2 bozos, right? But there's I'm quite surprised. I personally think that the PSL is a very good party. I don't expect them to win in the current context, but nobody even bothers to interview anyone from the PSL. And giving the PSL a platform at least gets other ideas out there. People can at least be exposed to ideas that say, well, you don't have to be a slave. You don't have to have a horrible life. And it's in your constitution, the pursuit of happiness. It's not at all utopian. If it's utopian, why is it in the constitution? Why? I think it's the only constitution that talks about the pursuit of happiness. So if there is going to be a pursuit of happiness, it's not going to happen with this juggling between, as George Galloway says, the 2 cheeks of the same ass. But getting back to Julian, because I've digressed a little bit, what to do for Julian, of course, it has to be an action that should also be, it's difficult to do things alone, but yeah, alone, if people feel disempowered or disabled in some way, they can sign petitions, they can send the emails, they can be active on educating, agitating, etc., organizing those around them. And I always say when I'm on Twitter, don't forget that an avalanche starts with a small, tiny stone. Anything, sometimes a small step will start something really big. And we're seeing now with the riots, this tragedy of this yet another person that was murdered. Clearly he was murdered. And if there were no riots, those 4 cops would never have been charged. And even when they were charged, 3rd-degree murder is a joke. I mean, they're going to walk. These people are going to walk. So it's that one incident that the establishment thought would be tolerated yet again that broke the camel's back, the last straw. So we need to, as I've been saying lately to people, what we need to do is to show people that Julian is the last straw that will break this camel's back. Because then they're not going, of course, they're not going to stop with Julian or with the journalists. They're going to go after anyone who speaks up to power. And there's no mystery to journalism. It's anyone who transfers, transmits, communicates the truth in the public interest. Anyone who transmits or communicates the truth about power in the public interest to anybody will be at risk. We have right now, we're not right in the middle of fascism, although I wonder now that, that Trump's gone in his bunker and built a wall around him. That's not a good sign. When people go into bunkers and build walls around them, it's usually the end of their political life, at least. So I don't think he's got I'm not saying he won't be re-elected because on the other side, you've got the senile, child molester who likes to snip people's hair. The choice is so bad that Trump will probably, out of the 2, he will probably be re-elected. But that doesn't mean he will have power. That depends on the people, whether he has power. And if people wanted to have any kind of power in the States, at least, or anywhere, but I'm speaking about the States because of the current situation, they need WikiLeaks. They need people like Julian if they want to be informed citizens, adults, who are not treated like, imbecilic children that have to be told how to think. so that they can make informed decisions about where they want their society to go. So, and yes, small steps count, big steps count. Artists are very important. I've made lots of calls to artists, filmmakers, painters, sculptors, whatever. As you know, we are all kind of from the same political camp. So artists are the engineers of the soul. They are the people that are remembered in history. We don't remember bankers 2,000 years down the track. We remember Socrates, who was also assassinated by character first. His character was assassinated first, and then they assassinated him physically. But it's always done in the same way. Nothing's changed from 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. It's the same modus operandum. And if we want to evolve as a society and go somewhere else and be, enlightened things, we need to have truth on our side. We can't do it where we're confused and where we're lied to. So more than any other country in the world, who needs Julian and WikiLeaks the most? It's the Americans, because right now, they are in their empire is dying. I mean, this is a dying empire. This is the Make America Great Again. Well, we see how great it has become again. It's a disaster. It's a disaster, and it's a disaster that even I don't see things going in any positive way unless the people, those who have who have the neurons and the guts to stand up to the fascists who are running the show. I don't see how this could go well for anybody over there. When you look at the level of poverty before COVID, before coronavirus, I think there are several statistics, but one that I came across was 45 million under the poverty line. It's inexcusable. In the richest country in the world, have so many millions, and now it's more because how many more people have lost their jobs with the coronavirus.
We're at 43 million officially filed for unemployment now. And you raised a couple of good points, Victor. I want to get to.
I thought you were talking about the number of viewers of this podcast.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I want to get your opinion on Rob's question from a bit ago, but I do want to interject here real quick. Last Sunday, I was speaking with Jared Beck, who is an attorney in Florida. He brought forth the DNC fraud lawsuit, dismissed out of hand in the Supreme Court just this week, because they fear giving Hillary Clinton a subpoena, giving W. Wasserman Schultz a subpoena and forcing them to reveal information. So it's easier to dismiss it. But he and I were talking about Plato's Republic and how it relates to where the U.S. is currently. And currently we're an oligarchy, and that oligarchy is crumbling, as you noted, Nikki. What comes next is democracy, small d, demos of the people, mob rule is basically what we're looking at before we cycle back to an actual republic. Not that we really had one to begin with, because when you count a giant number of the population as 3/5 of a fucking human being, you're doing republic wrong. You are. When you only allow white male property owners to vote, you're doing a republic wrong. So we're clearly looking at a generation of chaos. And it's incumbent on us, or at least on me as a parent. I don't know if you guys have children or not. No, Andrew does. It's incumbent on us as parents to let the generation that is going to age in chaos, to let them know what a semblance of the truth looks like. Let them know who the people are that have disseminated truth, and give them the abilities to stand in the truth, to be able to put it out into the public sphere. Victor, the original question was, how can we be effectively radical in a breakdown of social order?
Well, I would go back to the quote of Lenin, only the truth is revolutionary. I absolutely think that the struggle for truth is in itself a revolution. We live in the times of deceit. That's nothing new. We live in a time of liars, psychopaths, sociopaths that are in power, judicial, political. It's time to take, I would say it's time to put normal people in power They might not be the best, they might not be the most efficient, but God damn it, we really need today having normal people like you and me in power. I don't care if they're less efficient. I mean, is there any one of these people in power that you would think that you would like to spend an evening with or shake his hand, really? Is there any one of these people that you really trust to? I mean, you see it every day how they do their things. So first thing would be the truth and nothing but the truth. And that's why WikiLeaks was represented an existential threat, because WikiLeaks showed that all these people, all of them, be they Democrats or Republicans or whatever, it's not a matter of political sides. It's a matter of what you are. They showed us, WikiLeaks revealed, that these people were frauds in a position of power. Then that becomes dangerous. That becomes dangerous for everyone, and that it becomes dangerous for the world. And that they were criminals. It's interesting to note and to underline that they were criminals, because often it is said in the media that WikiLeaks published classified documents. And people go, whoa, classified documents. And I go, hey, what's a classified document? Who classifies it? What's the rules of classification? I mean, are we talking about criminals who have the ability to classify the proof of their crimes? What a wonderful world they live in. Because the fact is that the WikiLeaks published proofs of crimes that happened to be classified. Well, of course they were classified. You expect criminals to go out and post on posters and show their crimes to the world. Short from burning them or destroying them, what can they do? They classify them. And that's how they managed to point the finger to WikiLeaks, as if WikiLeaks did something wrong, when the wrongdoing was on the other side, and it was actually crimes that they were revealing. In this particular case, Afghanistan, Iraq. So the truth is our best weapon. Now, to answer the other question, if I understood the second question, what can I do? Basically, it was, what can I do from where I am, or whoever you are? What can I do? Well, anyhow, starting from the beginning, if you don't do anything, then you're part of the problem. So not doing anything is unacceptable. That has to be ruled out. Whatever. So in political cases, the true killer is silence. It's the silence that kills the political prisoners. It's the silence that takes them to Guantanamo. It's the silence that keeps these people unaccountable. If they were in the capacity, as I said, they would have placed a hood on Julian's head and thrown him into the trunk of a car and driven off. Well, we're in the West. There are certain forms that have to be respected. You can't do anything. Hey, you have to keep on pretending that you're something. So let's do it in a smarter way. Let's do it under the guise of a legal process. But they absolutely know that they're cheating. They know that they're lying. They know that. And they need the silence of the media around this case. Julian Assange is not alone. He's not isolated. He has been isolated from the public by a wall of silence imposed by the mainstream media. Alongside Julian, for those who haven't followed these sessions, he has the greatest journalist of our time. He has the Pulitzer Prizes. He has the human rights organizations. He's not alone. There is a big difference being alone and isolated. So the silence, the wall of silence of the mainstream media, we have to bring it down. So whatever you can do, writing a letter to any journal, any person you know, talking about it, writing a letter to the prison where Julian Assange is. That's in these kind of cases, political cases, they pay a lot of attention to the volume of the mail that the prisoner receives. It's a sign of the awareness of the public outside. So the more he receives mails, and it's easy to do, you can find the address on the website writejulian.com. There are very strict procedures. You can't send a postcard. You can't put a dried flower in the envelope. No photographs, just a plain letter and a few words. Please know that your envelope will be open, probably. So no mucking around, no fancy stuff. You need to write on the back of the envelope your name and address. Just that simple gesture. If you could do it, let's say once, maybe once a week, or regularly, every now and then. Tell him a joke. Tell him how you feel. Ask him how he's going on. Give him some news about what's going on. Just tell him that you're thinking about him and that you're there, and tell the prison of Belmarsh that there are people thinking about him. If that's the least you can do, well, that will be a great help. That will be a great help for us, because that will put pressure on the administration of the prison. If you're not a militant, a high-flying militant, and you're not used to this kind of stuff, and you don't know what to do, well, do what you know. If you don't know what to do, do what you know. Write a letter. That you can do. That would really be a help. And, well, let's hope for the best. The more you are, the more you will be writing letters, for instance. Well, I think that would be a good thing for us. And that would help us, the professional militants, let's say, whatever that means. But okay, that would help us bring down this wall of silence.
I was going to say also, you can write to organizations that are supposedly have a mandate to protect press freedom, like UNESCO.
Amnesty.
Forget Amnesty.
I want Amnesty to declare Julian Assange a prisoner of conscience, a political prisoner.
Amnesty International.
Not done.
Yes. Yes, there's no reason. He is a political prisoner. They should declare Julian Assange a political prisoner.
Worse. You know what they did? They said that they do not recognize him as a prisoner of conscience.
They should. They're wrong.
No, but that actually, they took a position that he's not. That's even worse. They should have
Positions change under pressure.
Look, Amnesty, for me, my point of view from what they've done in the past is they're in the service of the same people that are jailing Assange, and they're there to control the narrative. So I have, I would rather not have them on board, but that's my own personal opinion.
It's not a matter of having them on board. I just want one committee, whatever the committee is, be it the American, Nebraska, Ohio, Hawaii, Germany, Italy, whatever, any single committee, local committee, could decide to adopt the political prisoner, Julian Assange, and declare him a prisoner of conscience. And that's it.
Yeah, I wish they would. I hope that they're watching this and they do the right thing. I doubt that they will, but I hope and I plea with them.
Let's encourage them.
I would love to work with you guys to set up an international pressure campaign to get people from every country demanding that Amnesty International list him as a political prisoner. Because each week we put out a different call to action. So I would love that to be just a consistent staple that we put in there every week, is pressuring Amnesty International. Because I think that would make a huge impact if we could get them to actually make that.
We've entered, not me personally, but friends have actually met with the head of Amnesty in London. My experience is it's not a clean-cut decision that's been made. I mean, I think the decision has been made within Amnesty because there was not enough pressure. There are militants, there are some people, there were some, I think, that were on the verge of doing so, but then there's this rape case in Sweden, and maybe we didn't do our job good enough. Okay?
There is a rape case in Sweden that's been gone for ages now. I mean,
no, Nikki, it hasn't. It hasn't.
Officially,
I was talking to someone this afternoon.
Officially,
who's the first thing she mentioned about when I said I was going on a vigil at 7, I had to be home early because I was on a vigil cause of Julian Assange. The first thing she asked me was, "Oh, isn't that the guy that raped him?" Okay, no. In the public, no, it hasn't.
No, in the public mind, it hasn't, because right now the media has decided that it's better for them to stay silent than to keep smearing him.
Leaky, listen, the people of Amnesty are people like you and me. They read the mainstream media, not like you and me. They're like normal. They read the mainstream media. They're influenced by mainstream media.
Amnesty has good people. I'm not saying everybody in there is a rotten apple. I'm just saying that the line that Amnesty is taking is, I think, deliberate. I don't think there's a mistake. I don't think there's a coincidence. They did the same thing with Nelson Mandela. They refused to recognize Nelson Mandela as a prisoner of conscience. These people have a pretty, there's a good reason why they're called Shamnesty. They have a shameful past.
The truth, only the truth is revolutionary. You cannot compare. And I have struggled for Nelson Mandela for years. I painted slogans on walls, and I have.
Anyway, we just
for Nelson Mandela. But you can't compare the two cases.
Amnesty, I personally don't expect.
They were wrong in both cases, but you can't compare the two.
Yeah, sure. Let's work on what the people power, what people can do. Yes, of course, it's useful, even if they don't do anything. Of course, it's useful if they write to Amnesty and ask them to recognize Julian as a prisoner of conscience, because at least, they will know what we think. I just don't expect them to do much about it, but that's me. Anyway, I think that it's better to write to the Council of Europe, because the Council of Europe is a powerful institution, and they have already expressed, they've already criticized the UK about this situation. And he is a protected journalist. He's on a list of protected journalists. I mean, it took them a long time to get there, but they got there. So that's good. Let's concentrate on institutions that are a little bit ahead, and much further ahead than Amnesty, for example. So the Council of Europe, definitely, I think it's a good way to go, to write to them.
You can write to both.
Sorry?
People can write to both. Yeah,
people can write, to these are official institutions.
It's not one or the other. It can be one and the other.
That's right. Well, no, none of this is mutually exclusive. So I think, they don't have to have 1,000 letters. One good template letter where they say, I'm a citizen of this country. This is the information I have about this person. And I want you to do your utmost to make sure that this man is freed immediately, because he is at risk of dying well before September. Right. I don't think people understand the urgency of a person who has so many, apart from the psychological torture, which, has ruined his health totally. He's got a pulmonary disease. He's got all sorts of physical problems. The man is, he's not a saint floating in the sky. He's a physical human being who's been tortured for a decade, massively, intensively tortured since he was arrested on the 11th of April, 2019. So, everyone has these, I'm amazed they're still alive. Everyone has their limits. How is everyone going to feel if we get an announcement he's dead from natural causes, coronavirus? How are people going to feel about this? How are they going to live with themselves when they can't say they don't know anymore? The people who don't know is because they don't want to know. We are now in a situation where people are willfully blind because for them it's a mountain, it's too big, and they can't muster the courage to do the right thing. Well, that's on them. If they can't muster the courage to discover the truth when the truth is available, that's on them. They'll have to live with that. And it will have consequences on their lives, because they will not stop with Julian. They will go after anybody, whether they're a journalist or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, or a janitor. It doesn't matter who you are. If you stand up to these criminals, they will go after you if you have any kind of influence on anybody around you. And as for what you were talking about before, even the American law does not protect crimes. So that classification is not protected under American law either. It's not really, yes, it's classified officially, but if you go before a real court and not before a kangaroo court, it would be declassified immediately. No law protects crimes, and no law protects war crimes or crimes against humanity. In fact, they're so serious that there is no prescription. There's no statute of limitations. Anyone who commits a war crime or a crime against humanity, they can be caught at any time during their lifetime and be brought to justice. So the people who are doing this, who think that they will forever be living happy days, history has its turns, twists and turns, and maybe it won't be the case. So I think that the top honchos think that they're beyond it and nothing will happen to them. But, there's the middle people. We should be going towards the middle people. because if anything goes wrong, they will be the first ones to pay. The managers of this crime, this huge crime, which, as I said earlier, is for me a crime against humanity, and not only against Julian. It's against Julian. It's not. You can have a crime against humanity against one person, by the way, if the context is right. So what a court would look at would be the overall context. So it is possible that a crime against humanity is committed against one individual, but in this case, we have Julian, we have Chelsea Manning, who was incarcerated again for a year, the second time for a year, in order to get false testimony out of him. Jeremy Hammond. We've got Olabini, who's, got all his problems in Ecuador with the law. We've got people that disappeared, whose names we've forgotten. The guy who disappeared from Norway at the end of 2018, I forget his name. It's one of those complicated names I can't pronounce. And that's it. He disappeared. That was it. Nobody said anything about him anymore. He was, I think, is he the second, third in charge? Anyway, very heavily implicated, within a strong element within WikiLeaks. So we're watching a crime against humanity before our eyes. It fits the definition of Article 7.1 of the Statute of Rome, more specifically Article 7.1, subparagraph H, and the last one, K. And unfortunately, I haven't been successful in getting other lawyers to rally behind this particular aspect of the law in order to say to them that the day may come that at least some of them will answer to this. And I think that, like George Floyd, I think people think that if Julian dies, I think there will be a huge backlash from worldwide, I think. But I don't know, maybe some cognitive dissonance, denial. They think that Batman will come along and rescue him. I'm not sure how they think this is going to go, but they need to understand that the man is in danger of dying before the trial, before the September trial. And I think that one reason why they're not giving the venue and all that is they're trying to distract us, confuse us. They want to make sure that journalists worldwide, how are they going to book their hotels if they don't know where it's going to be? How can the world press even be there? How is it going to be organized? You know what I mean? So they're doing everything to put obstacles in our way, and we're just sitting back being spectators. We're saying, oh, but what can we do? What can we do? We can do a few things. We can push certain institutions to go further because they haven't gone far enough. It's not enough for the Council of Europe to say he's on a list. It's just not enough. I mean, if these people want to earn tax-free salaries and pretend to be the rulers of the free world, they're going to have to earn those salaries and do the right thing by us because they're supposedly there to keep the peace of the world. Well, they haven't done their jobs very well, and they've done an appalling job when it comes to freedom of the press and Julian Assange. It's appalling. They just all of them are, because I've been keeping tabs on what each one of these institutions has been doing, and you've got. And no, sorry, it's not enough. It's not enough to say this is terrible. For example, if I may cite what the Council of Europe guy said, I can find it very quick. I mean, we've got evidence, concrete evidence that he's being tortured, for heaven's sakes, that he's been arbitrarily detained, These are official rulings. We have no official ruling that he raped anybody, but we do have official rulings by important institutions, international ones, that he has been arbitrarily detained for years and that he's been tortured for years. So we've got that. So what do we need? A corpse? Anyway, I'm going to just quickly see if I can find what they, because I'd like to cite what the Council of Europe said, if I can find it. My notes. Oh, where is it? Okay. And the other thing that's shocking is the amount of only 2 judges have spoken, as far as I know. Michael Kirby, who's a former judge of the Australian High Court, and Eva Joly. 2 judges. Judges are supposed to be the symbol of justice. They're supposed to uphold the law. Where are they? There are judges all over the world. Where are these judges to say this is shocking? Every single rule of law has been breached, international and domestic. in all these states, in the UK and the USA, and the other countries that have also breached. Sorry, I'm just trying to find specifically what this guy said, but I can't. Well, I can cite.
While you're looking for that, one of the things that we've talked about, because the questions come up a lot here, what can one person do? And we have spoken since the very beginning about the idea of decentralized activism. Being the one person in your community that'll go to city council meetings and talk about this issue, put up posters on telephone poles, but also reach out to different activist organizations and go there and say, hey, can I give a little educational piece, or can I talk for a little bit? Because it doesn't take an army of people to spread this information about Julian. It takes one person in a room saying, hey, this is the situation. And a lot of times, even in groups that you would think would care more about the rape allegations and all that bullshit that exists behind there, when you actually break it down and say, hey, he's basically been in solitary confinement for 450 days now, like 23 hours a day, people will just say, hey, yeah, I kind of realized that those were bullshit. So it's really trying to just get one person in the community to go out to be his voice that makes the difference right now.
Yes, it does. But I would also like to ask the people out there who are very upset about this, this one so-called rape allegation, why they're not upset about stronger rape allegations against Trump and Biden and Prince Andrew, who, if he was investigated, things would be very, very serious for him, because it's not just rape of minors, it's sex trafficking, etc. I'm not saying he did it. I'm just saying there should be an investigation, because there have been serious allegations, credible allegations made, and there should at least be an investigation. So the same people that are screaming, like hyenas about rape are not concerned at all about anybody else being a rapist. They're ready to vote for one of the two that are running in the US election. Alleged rapists, I didn't say that. We're talking about a similar situation with more than two women. And in any case, as Victor said earlier, that those rape allegations, they were Marianne Nee has been proven, or is being investigated for having forged the statements, for having manipulated the statements of the two women. Neither of the two women went there for any to make any allegations for rape. They were there because they wanted to force him to do an HIV test. That's all. And it was turned in very bizarre circumstances into something else. And even it wouldn't be rape under anybody else's laws. This is very specific to Sweden. If a condom falls off, suddenly it's rape. I don't know. Anyway, but in any case, officially it's closed, that situation. There were never any, people have to get it in their heads. Never, ever have there been any rape charges filed against Julian. There've never been any rape charges. So they've got to, get their heads around this, because it's crazy to continue with this lie. It's just a lie. Provably a lie today, provably, and always, and a lie that media like The Guardian pushed. And as far as I'm concerned, The Guardian and media like The Guardian should be also investigated and prosecuted, I think, for perversion of the course of justice. What they did was to pervert the course of justice. They to this day, they have not withdrawn false stories like the Manafort story. It's still up there. Whilst another trial is on. So, of course, they are, I think, perverting the course of justice. They should not be left in peace to continue all the smearing. There's anyway. Sorry, Victor, you wanted to say something.
Yeah. As I say, in order to understand the universe, you have to go back to the Big Bang. The Big Bang in the Julian Assange case was this pseudo accusation of rape. So I guess the people are wondering, who are watching us, maybe you've already talked about it on this show, I don't know. They're probably wondering, how do you get from, I've been hearing for 10 years that this guy has been accused of rape and should be extradited to Sweden, to these weirdos on this show saying that actually there never was any accusation of rape. How did we go from one to the other? I can imagine the people struggling to try and understand how this could happen. Actually, it's quite simple, because between us, the media, and you guys listening to us, there's this one person called Marianne Nee, which is a prosecutor in Sweden, who forged the arrest warrant, changing the words of the testimonies that the women gave, which had nothing to do about rape, nothing to do about any kind of violence, actually turned their statements around and forged, I don't know if it's the right term in English, but actually she manipulated. She actually committed a crime, if I understand how justice works, when a prosecutor changes and invents the terms. So it's quite simple, guys. We are only a handful of people around the world, apparently, who have actually read the depositions of the women, who are public documents today. They have been leaked. So if any journalist out there was quite interested in knowing what really happened, well, he could do a bit of research like we did. So on one hand, you have nothing, empty air. Bouncing upon this empty air, if I may say so, this Swedish prosecutor called Marianne Nee, which we are trying to investigate, and which some in Sweden are actually moving against her because of this, who actually forged her arrest warrant, which became not an accusation of rape, but the beginning of a preliminary investigation that lasted 7 years instead of lasting 2 weeks as they usually do. 7 years. And she absolutely wanted Julian Assange to go back to Sweden. So that's how it all started. And the thing is that since then, everything has been on the same course. Judges lying, magistrates cheating, changing the law as the game as the things go on. It's been an awful process since the beginning. Actually, it's been a trap that had been set up, started in Sweden. The prey has been caught. Is actually in the hands of the English justice and about to be delivered to the US butchers. That's what happened.
So we recently had a basically a statement of solidarity come out with the UK journalists. If we can get that pulled up, Josh. And this is up on the Don't Extradite Assange campaign website. A new call for solidarity with Julian Assange has been issued as his extradition hearing is set to resume in September. The following motions in support of Assange in Birmingham TUC and from the National Union of Journalists, a resolution campaign is being launched across the labor movement. A comprehensive resolution adopted by the National Union of Journalists is to be circulated for other trade unions, labor party bodies, and campaign organizations to adopt for their own use. Please put this resolution to your next meeting, said John Reese from the Don't Extradite Assange campaign. This is defining free speech case in the 21st century, freedom of information, free from government censorship, and is the lifeblood of an effective labor movement. The National Union of Journalists made a stand. Follow their example. I think this would be a great piece to share with these other institutions, this statement by the National Union of Journalists. So I just wanted to make sure that we touched on this because this is a big, almost turning point at this point for Julian, because before there wasn't this large solidarity movement across all of the different groups of organized labor. So I was just really wondering what your guys' opinions are on this.
I think that with the journalist unions, they did come on board as soon as he was arrested. The French ones as well, the one in MEAA in Australia, the UK journalist union, the European. So as soon as he was arrested, they did come together. But I don't think anyone's hearing them. I don't think I don't think they've had enough. Perhaps they haven't put enough pressure, because all they seem to have done is to put out statements every now and then, but there hasn't been a continuing pressure. There should have been a continuing pressure by all of the journalists' unions. So it's unfortunate that they haven't really done that. There should be continuing pressure by the institutions I mentioned earlier, like the Council of Europe and the UN. For example, you've got, apart from, I think the only one who's been a very positive force from the UN, he's not with the UN, he's an independent UN special rapporteur, is Neil Smeltzer. He did excellent work, and he doesn't work for the UN, he's independent. So we need the heads of these institutions like Antonio Guterres, Michelle Bachelet. They need to open their mouths and say the name. They need to say the name instead of having these silly token freedom of the press events where the most persecuted journalist is not even mentioned. It's crazy. Yeah, and the other thing for the rendition, for people who don't know what rendition is and they don't want to use exactly that word, another way of referring to what they're doing to Julian is government-sponsored abduction. That's what's happening. And the US has a record as long as my arm and everybody else's arm of this kind of conduct. And I wanted to say that the United Nations considers one nation abducting the citizens of another a crime against humanity. So here we go again with the crime against humanity. Yeah, when you look at the law around this case, everything is a disaster, including all the hearings that are supposed to open justice. You know, in the name of open justice, Perpetrator took away the anonymity of Julian's partner and children. Yet she's done everything to hide justice from the rest of us through the so-called public hearings. What a joke! In the smallest courtroom, in whether it's in Woolwich or Westminster, through video links that never work. Every time, even the last one, I asked to participate. I got the link a few minutes before, and I couldn't link it. I couldn't get through. A lot of journalists said they couldn't hear. You've got to. It's a disaster. That what concerns me is that they know that we know. I mean, it's such a badly orchestrated circus. They must know that we know, and they're not worried. They're not worried about the consequences of us knowing. So it's a puzzle for me. It's a puzzle. I mean, how I don't know what they're planning. Have they planned it all the way to the end? I don't know. But, you know, intelligent people, I think, know. And you don't have to have a doctorate or be a rocket scientist. Intelligent people can see throughout all the steps of this circus that it's been very badly put together. And so, you know, I mean, I'm at the moment preparing a complaint to the International Criminal Court. There has been one that was done by a French group in June 2019. It was rejected. I got a letter from the court because I wanted to know what happened to that. It wasn't rejected. They decided not to go through with it, but they're keeping it on record. That's good. They're keeping it on record. And now I'm preparing a letter that a group of us will send to the court again with all the new evidence, because now we have all the new evidence also about the spying from UC Global on his lawyers and his family. That's very important. It's, you know, if you look at Article 6 of the European Convention of Human Rights, together with the Article 6 of the UK Human Rights Act 1998, which is almost a copy-paste of the European Convention of Human Rights, Article 6, which is on due process, which just means, you know, how you give a fair trial, you know, what's a fair trial and what's a public trial and all that. Every single word in that has been trampled on. And it's not the only, we've got Article 3, the torture article that prohibits torture in all circumstances. There's never any excuse for torture, ever. It's a non-derogable right. You know, prisoners still have rights. And let's not forget that Julian is not a convicted prisoner. He is a detainee on remand for a shoddy so-called extradition hearing. So he's got the presumption of innocence that he's never been given. He's been treated like the worst terrorist of all time. He's a Class A category prisoner. When he's finished his sentence for skipping bail, supposedly, ended on the 22nd of September 2019. He should have been released immediately after that, even with an extradition hearing pending, right? Instead, he's kept in a high security prison, totally isolated, not able to contact anyone. They've totally muffled him so that he can't say anything to anybody. And I think they're just waiting for him to die of natural causes or suicide.
No, I wholly agree, because that's something that if he dies of COVID-19 or something like that in prison, all these guys kind of just get to wash their hands and go, oh, well, it didn't get to go to trial. Well, there was no breakdown of rule of law because it never got to the point of breaking down, and just all those other little bullshit nuances that get to happen. And then some people can act at that point like they've always supported him and this is so sad. And then just all of these other things that just at the end of the day just make me feel infuriated, imagining even the fact that people may get to do this one day as a result of what we're seeing in the present moment.
Well, sorry, if I could say, the Council of Europe did put out some principles with the COVID crisis, and I've isolated 3 main ones where they're breaching them, right? Where the UK is breaching them. And I could give you that link later on for people who want to look at it. I'm just going to read the following principles that are not being respected. One was that they said the concerted efforts should be made by all relevant authorities to resort to alternatives to deprivation of liberty. Such an approach is imperative, in particular, in situations of overcrowding, which is the case. Further, authorities should make greater use of alternatives to pre-trial detention. So that's one of the principles that was given to them. The other one is special attention would be required for specific needs of detained persons with particular regard to vulnerable groups and or at-risk groups. Julian is one of those vulnerable or at-risk groups because he's got a pre-existing medical condition. This is very clear in the principle. It says, such as older persons and persons with pre-existing medical conditions. And then the last one I noted is fundamental safeguards against the ill treatment of persons in the custody of law enforcement officials, access to a lawyer, he's been denied access to his lawyers, access to a doctor, that as well, must be, so it says, fundamental safeguards against the ill treatment of persons in the custody of law enforcement officials must be fully respected in all circumstances and at all times. So the UK is knowingly violating every principle, every directive, everything that is being sent their way. They can't say they can't say it's a mistake. This is not a mistake. This is totally willful. They cannot say that there was no intent to commit this crime. I know, we'll repeat, it's a crime against humanity. And I can go through that Article 7(1)(h) if you want, if we have the time. It fits the definition. That what they're doing to Julian Assange fits that definition of a crime against humanity. If you want me to go through it, I can. Is that okay? Would you like me to go through very quickly, or is that too much?
Yeah, if you could go through it quickly, that would be awesome.
I'll try to
we got to start wrapping up after that.
Yeah, well, it's actually, it's on my website. I did publish this letter that I sent to Buckland and Braverman. I did publish it on my own website for people who want to look at it. But okay, here we go. Article 7(1)(h) of the Statute of Rome, crime against humanity. It's a crime against humanity of persecution. Now, there's a document called the Elements of Crime that people can look at, and the court uses that document as a guideline when they apply the law. But I'll try to make it simple. I may not succeed. But anyway, the steps are, there are about 6 steps. One is that the perpetrator, the person that's committing the crime against humanity, right? So in this case, let's just say, let's make it simple and say it's only the UK. Okay, it's not, because there's complicity as well. Anyway, so the perpetrator severely deprived, contrary to international law, one or more persons of fundamental rights. So yes, you can have a crime against humanity against one person. So one or more persons of fundamental rights. The perpetrator, second element, the perpetrator targeted such person or persons by reason of the identity of a group or collectivity, or targeted the group or collectivity as such. Now, the grand jury was known as the WikiLeaks grand jury. So it's being targeted as a group, because already you're calling the grand jury a WikiLeaks grand jury. The attacks were directed against Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, Jeremy Hammond, among others, because of their identity as journalist, publisher, or whistleblower. Third element, such targeting was based on political or other grounds that are universally recognized as impermissible under international law. I think we can go into that at greater length afterwards, whether the grounds are political. I think they are, but so that I don't stop the flow, we can go back to that later. Number 4, the conduct that was committed in connection with any act referred to in Article 7, Paragraph 1 of the statute, or any crime within the jurisdiction of the court. For example, the persecution against Julian and the others was committed in connection with international crimes. What were such as the international crimes under Article 7 are murder, extermination, torture, rape, political, racial, or religious persecution, and other inhumane acts, as evidenced by the collateral murder video and the Afghan and Iraq logs. If Julian had not published the collateral murder video or the Afghan and Iraq logs, nobody would be interested in him. They're after him for political reasons, because he politically rocked their political sham democracy and their war crimes. Number 5, the conduct against Julian and the others was committed as part of a widespread or systematic, so it's either or, widespread or systematic attack. So it's not widespread, but it's systematic attack directed against the civilian population, because these people are civilians. What's the civilian population? Journalists, publishers, whistleblowers. And what have we seen since he's been arrested? An intensified attack against the same group of people, this collectivity, this group of people, journalists and whistleblowers generally. And 6, the perpetrator knew that the conduct was part of or intended to the conduct to be part of a widespread or systematic attack. So they know, just to cut a long story, they know that this is a systematic attack. They've been torturing the guy for 10 years. They know they've been torturing him. They've had rulings against them that they were torturing him or detaining him. And they can't say they didn't know. The UN had a ruling. The UN working group made a ruling against them in 2015. It was appealed twice. They lost twice, and they're still doing it. So they're very much aware of this attack being political, and they're very much aware of the attack itself and against whom it's directed. We've got at least 3 identifiable victims: Julian, Chelsea Manning, and Jeremy Hammond. We've got millions of war victims who are being deprived of the right to have that evidence, to get that information, to have the evidence and go and get justice. If they want to go to the International Criminal Court, how are they going to do that even if they have the WikiLeaks and they go to court? What's the court going to say? The International Criminal Court is going to say, what? You cannot, this evidence is not admissible because it was obtained under the Espionage Act, and the publisher is a criminal. How is this evidence ever going to get into an international criminal court? Maybe I overloaded that question, but basically I'm just saying we could be in a very bizarre situation where people that have evidence that was revealed or produced through WikiLeaks will not be allowed to present that evidence before an international criminal court. That's crazy.
Yeah, especially with Mike Pompeo recently basically saying, hey, we're going to harass and arrest the international criminal courts and their families. That was about, I think.
They should have arrested him as soon as he said that. They should not, they can't arrest him. They should have put out they should have put out a warrant on him just for saying that. But they're too chicken. I'm sorry, if they're too chicken to apply the law, they should go home and shut up the shop. because the only people they're prosecuting and persecuting, or whatever they do, the only people prosecuted in that court are black or brown. Has one white person, has Blair, Sarkozy, all the other, a list, practically every president in the United States, and I'll throw in Clinton, the Clintons, and the Obamas, and the Bushes, and at least in the last 30 years, right? Practically every one of them is guilty of war crimes. Now, if they cannot apply the law under that statute, they should just say they can't do it, and they should go home and not give anybody any illusions that we have any international law. Let us take care of our business then. Let justice be in the hands of the people, and we'll sort it out. Because I think it's appalling that one bully can say, well, if you investigate me, I'm going to bump off you and your family and arrest you and whatever. Because this is a pattern of behavior. With the OPCW, when the whistle was blown on them and something was going to happen, and then they tried to intimidate one of the heads of the OPCW. That cannot go on forever. We can't live in this cowboy wild west situation where we're terrified of taking the real criminals before a court, because this is the situation. We are terrified, and I think a lot of people have not been mobilized, not only because of the words, but because we're in a situation where most people are terrified, including the alternative media, including the public at large. They're terrified that we may move to the next step. We're not far away from the next step of full-on fascism, where they'll just lock us up and we'll be forgotten and execute us in one way or another. And so if these institutions are incapable, then we should be aware of that. I happen to think they are incapable. I'm sorry to say that. I continue to appeal to them. I continue to write to them, but I'm sorry to say that I do not expect any of them to do anything at all, apart from symbolic token words, little statements here and there saying this is appalling, it's disproportionate, it's excessive. Yes, okay, so do something. They've got the power to do something, so why don't they do something? I don't care what it is, sanctions against the US if they have to. I don't care. It's their job also to go a step further and not just give us, lots of words full of hot air. Because the way they're going, even their system will crumble, even their barbaric, because we are at the crossroads of barbarism and socialism, I think, my own personal view of the world right now. And we're heading pretty fast into barbarism for the moment.
There's no doubt of that. You're absolutely right. And there's one of two ways that we come out of barbarism, and that's either we're slaughtered en masse by some sort of tribal warlord, or we collectively organize and come out of that barbarism as a legitimate republic. We're going to wrap up the vigil for the day. Victor, before we go, I would really like to get your final thoughts, and I would also like to invite you on to Slow News Day. You too, Nikki. You're welcome on my show anytime that we can schedule it. I think it would be a fascinating conversation. But yeah, please give your final thoughts. Let people know where they can find you. Victor, if you have social media accounts, and please promote your website. Same with you, Nikki.
I'll go quickly. I'm on Twitter, and I'm also on many alternative media platforms because I get shadow banned all the time on Twitter. But on Twitter, I'm Katya Campus, so KATYA_Campus. I'm also on Mastodon and on Gibberfish and a few other alternative sites, usually under Katya Campus or Dreamtime Aquarium. So that's where people can find me. I don't like to use Facebook. It's useless. The censorship is even worse over there. And so I post a lot of things about Julian on those platforms. And I've got my own website, which is Katya Stiletti Book Bunker. But anyway, that's on my pinned tweet, has the details to my website. And yeah, So my final thoughts are: people really, honestly, I'm not appealing to anyone except for the people, the ordinary, the good ordinary person, the good ordinary person who understands what love is. And if this person who's being persecuted was your brother or your son or your father, you would really immediately find a way to organize and help him out of this appalling, barbaric situation. So we have to do something. Anything, if the smallest action could be a big action. You may not even realize how your small, what you think is a small action, is a huge action. So please, please, overcome your fears, and get brave, and join us in this battle. That's all.
Where can people find you, Victor? And a couple of final thoughts as we head out.
Well, considering that I'm speaking to an American audience, I guess that the publications we publish in French would not be much help to them, but they can find us at a website called legrandsoir.info. Julian Assange was a genius, is a genius in computer technology. He could have ended up as a big shot in the Silicon Valley, but he ended up as an anti-Zuckerberg. Why? He did this to sacrifice himself for our cause, the right of the public to know. There was no money to be gained in the Operation WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is free. You can actually visit their site, wikileaks.org, search the documents yourself, things that journalists should have been doing these last years. They only mention the leaks. They don't mention often what's in the leaks. So considering that his struggle was for our right to be informed of the public, I just ask yourselves, can you imagine a world without WikiLeaks? And now imagine a world with WikiLeaks, and ask yourself, which one do you prefer? And to act in consequence. That's it.
And again, I just want to thank you guys both very much for joining us. I want to thank Josh behind the scenes for helping us out on the tech side, and everybody that was watching this evening. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund, and you can find us, all of this, on Twitter at action_4 Assange or actionforassange.com.
My name is Steve Boykin, and I host a show called Slow News Day. You can normally find it on YouTube by typing in Slow News Day Podcast into the search bar. I'm also on the Rockfin and DLive and a couple other platforms, I think, or will be soon. Before I close out, Sarah Wagner, thank you for the super sticker. That's fucking awesome. And I would like to remind everyone that on my show, all of my super chats are going to get rolled over into our GoFundMe. So that's another way to support the DC events. Although it is important to remind you that YouTube takes 40% of the money that you kick in, whereas the GoFundMe only takes 10%. So if you are supporting by giving super chats, I recommend just going directly to the GoFundMe for that. Thank you, Nikki and Victor. It's been wonderful. Again, please, I will follow up with you and get you scheduled for my show independently or together, either way. Tomorrow, my guest will be Mark Lubers, who is an open yet still hidden member of Anonymous. That will be a fun conversation. And yeah, I love you guys. Big thanks to Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos, and Mean Panda for the graphics, and my co-host Andrew. And we will see you Tuesday evening, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And good luck to us all.